everyone for today's webinar section. So our first speaker is Dr. Nadhrah, who is the founder of BikeCommute USM. So I would like to pass the screen to her. Welcome, Dr. Nadhrah.
Thank you, Diva. So let me check. All right. Can you see the screen now?
Yeah, I can see.
All right, cool. So Assalamualaikum and good evening all, and thank you for joining us tonight. So thank you to Jedi as well for this opportunity to talk about utility cycling and how the travel choices we make have a big impact on climate change. So, all right. So this is the outline of my presentations. I will start first by discussing our societal dependence on automobiles. Next, we're going to look at the benefits of utility cycling, and then moving on to the challenges or the blocking factors to utility cycling. And finally, moving forward, what are things that we should consider implementing to make the bicycle as an alternative mode of transportation. I think we need to realize that emissions from transport are actually going up and not down, and currently account for nearly 25% of all carbon emissions. So for everyday travel, many of us still rely on the motor vehicles, even for a very short trips. And our planet couldn't survive with the way we move around if we don't take action like right now. And so, but we need to acknowledge that we are too dependent on motor vehicles, given the fact that how we shape our life around automobile, and just look at how we build and design our cities. You can see in the space and resources allocated to motor vehicles. And closer to home, where for the past couple of years we have been struggling in our fights against the Penang Transport Master Plan. And we know from decades of experience around the world, as well as research, that government's plan to widen and build more roads and highways would not solve the traffic congestions. In fact, more roads will induce more people to drive. Sorry. All right. So our societal dependence on motor vehicles is partly influenced by our transport policy, promoting car manufacturing industries. And then we make it easy for people to own motor vehicles, and we also make it convenient for people to move around by driving or riding motorbikes. And I think our society is still having the perceptions that owning a car gives them freedoms, and to some extent demonstrates socio-economic status. It's about time that we stop prioritizing the automobile. I think we need to face the reality of the impacts motor vehicles have on people and the planet. And it's time to seriously consider giving people better options than driving. And the options that we have, whether we like it or not, is to adopt an aggressive sustainable transportation plan, such as improving public transit, and to tap on the potential of walking and cycling infrastructure. So now let's talk about the humble bicycle and utility cycling. So utility cycling is described in contrast with recreational cycling, in the sense that bicycle is used as a mode of transport for practical purposes, such as commuting to and from work and running errands. Okay, so why utility cycling? So cycling in general has many benefits. More so if you're integrating cycling as part of your daily travel or commute. And I'm pretty sure a lot of us are familiar with cycling advantages, such as it's good for our health. In fact, I think a lot of us tend to associate cycling with health benefits. And research also consistently shows that cycling is good not only for physical health, but also mental health. And of course, related to climate change, cycling is good for our planet. Cycling, it reduces carbon footprint. And so if we want cleaner air in our city, definitely we need to get rid of motor vehicles. In fact, I think that was a significant lessons from lockdowns around the world recently. Cycling also is silent, and it helps to reduce noise pollutions, and it also helps with lower traffic congestions, because bikes enable more people to move through streets at a time compared to cars. And sometimes it is much faster and easier to get around with bikes compared to using motor vehicles. It's also flexible. You can stop and explore roads and places where that car and motorbikes can get to. And it's also affordable, no expenses on gas, no tax or parking fees, and it requires a very low maintenance. All right. Bikes also takes up less space than other motor vehicles, and these pictures illustrated the point very well. You can see here a comparison if the space required to transport 60 people compared to if you're using public transit and bicycle. And one car park is actually can accommodate at least 10 normal bicycles. And in this picture, I believe it's about at least 40 folding bikes that can fit in one car park. So it's very space efficient. Now, I think we rarely highlight this benefit, and it is something that I personally appreciate, which is how cycling is very sociable, in the sense that you get to interact with people on the streets. You get to chat with fellow cyclists, exchange hellos or smile with people on the streets. And so research also shows that these social interactions while cycling is associated with happiness, and it can reduce stress, which is great for mental health. And if you've been to any cycling friendly cities, such as in Amsterdam, Copenhagen, you notice how cycling actually helps to improve the quality of public space. It makes the city look very friendly and vibrant. Okay, what is the current situations of utility cycling in Malaysia? Unfortunately, utility cycling is not common in our country, especially among the locals. Mostly you will see people commuting by bike are the foreign workers. Just to share with you all, the people that I know who are consistently commuting by bike to work. This one on the left, on the right side is one of my colleagues, Dr. Por. So she started cycling to work last year after moving back to Penang from KL. And her commute is about, I think, 10 to 15 minutes, and she really enjoyed the commute. And this guy, Dr. Loh, who is actually a lecturer at KU Penang, so he rides to work almost on a daily basis. I mean, I think for the past 20 years or so, from the mainland to KU Penang via ferry. So his commute takes about 15 minutes from his home to the Butterworth ferry terminal, and then 20 minutes on the ferry, and then another 15 minutes he cycle from Jetty to KDU. So this is actually a great example of on how he used the bicycle as the first and last mile solutions. And anyway, this picture shows cyclists with lycra and cycling gears and what we call racing bike. So leisure cycling activity is trendy and it's quite popular in Malaysia and even in Penang. You can see hundreds and sometimes thousands of people participating in cycling events, or just cycling for fun during weekends. But the majority of these people won't ride to work or school. So there are reasons why some people, including avid cyclists, choose to or not to use bicycle for their everyday travel. So, okay, let's unpack the factors that hinder many people from using bicycle as a mode of transport. One, of course, the off-cited reason is the weather. The thought of riding in hot and humid weather or in the rain seems to be unbearable to many of us. And to some extent, adverse weather can make cycling challenging. But in contrast, I put a news here. Here we can see kids in Finland who are actually still cycling even in the most extreme weather. This is not to say that winter cycling is easier, but I think actually riding in the freezing temperature is not that convenient and to some extent more challenging because you will have to put on extra layers and winter gears. But people are still doing it. And, of course, weather is out of our control. But the point is that there are things that we can do to overcome this challenge. Another concern is that another concern with many of us is either the landscape or the distance, which is not viable or practical enough to cycle. In fact, research shows that people wouldn't commute by bike if the trips is more than 10 kilometers each way. But within the urban context, typically more than 50% of urban trips, I think, are less than 10 kilometers, a distance that can be easily covered by bicycle. Now, built environment is another challenge. There is a saying that, you build it and they will come. But the problem is that even when we build it, nobody seems to come. So the question is, are we building the right and functional cycling infrastructure? Is the bike lane constructed, is to serve for commuting or for recreational purposes? So I think we need to clarify, we need to clearly understand the goal of building such infrastructure. For example, this one is the Penang Cycling Master Plan, and it shows that Penang has about 200 kilometers of cycling lane. I think it's important to note that the 200 kilometers is not the separated or segregated bike lanes. So these 200 kilometers actually includes the shared roads. So it is a shared or mixed road when you see these sharrows. Okay, what we call the bike symbol that you see painted on the roads. So this is called sharrows. I have mixed feelings about putting sharrows on the roads. Well, I think it's good to create awareness that this road is a shared road with other vehicles. But there is also research that documented how sharrows doesn't necessarily keep cyclists safer or even convince more people to ride. So see these pictures? So with our limited cycling infrastructure, these situations can be frustrating. Now, if you have been using the bike lane in Penang or maybe in KL, I'm sure you have come across motorbikes encroaching the bike lanes. And despite a clear signboard, saying that no motorbikes is allowed on bike lanes. So one of the things that the MPAB did was to put these metal barriers on the bike lane to stop motorbikes from coming in, but it didn't actually work. So in the next section, I will explain why it is not a good idea to put such barriers. And then this is also another challenge. You see cars that park in the bike lane, right? And then, we also need to talk about cycling facilities, such as bike parking. You see, this is bike parking, but you see motorbikes actually occupy this bike parking, and the absence of shower room or locker at workplaces also can be a challenge for a lot of people if they intend to commute by bicycle. All right, the next one is what I call perceptions and stereotypes. In our context, which is a predominantly car-oriented city, I think there's still perceptions that associating car and bicycle with socioeconomic status. Some people still view the bicycle as a transport option for the people in the low income bracket. And also, there are plenty of different stereotypes in our society. Like, for example, cyclists don't belong on the road, or roads are exclusively meant for motor vehicles, and not for bicycle. So to some extent, I think this kind of attitude is still prevalent among us. But the biggest concern for people to bike commuting is safety. A lot of people view that riding bicycles on a shared road like this, this is in KL, with other motorized vehicles as a challenge, and many feel uncomfortable to do so. And there is a considerable danger to cyclists because of the speed of the traffic, and Malaysian drivers are also notorious for their bad driving behavior. And at the same time, we don't have many educational programs for drivers on giving priority to vulnerable road users, such as cyclists. And I also think that we are still lacking in terms of rules and regulations that can protect cyclists. All right, so moving forward, what are things that we can consider to overcome these challenges? So yes, our goal is to see more people commuting by bike, but in a car-centric society like us, getting more people to switch from cars to bike, it's very difficult. It's an uphill task. But I think the general principle is that people must feel safe from getting from point A to point B on a bike. And so I will explain both the hard and soft measures that we can consider implementing. So again, back to the built environment. To make cycling an alternative of commuting, I think the built environment must be improved. This will include the bike lane that is well connected between residential areas to major destinations, such as public places like schools, malls, markets, parks, and public transit. It also must be separated and protected to make it safe, so that even kids or the inexperienced cyclists can ride anywhere. So other criteria that often associated with good bike lane are such as directness and convenience. So when you ride a bike, you want to maintain the momentum. So that's why I think putting those barriers on the bike lane is not a good idea. Because like this guy, you have to stop and you have to dismount your bike, right? And so it's very inconvenient. And yeah, and also when you ride a bike, you want a journey with less detours and U-turns. And at the end of your journey, you want to make sure that you have a convenient and safe bike parking to lock your bike. Right, in terms of comfort, I think it's very important to have a shaded bike lane. Okay, even especially in our tropical climate, it'd be great if the bike lane can be well shaded. So and also smooth surface and good lighting as well. And then other cycling facilities like end of trip facilities. In addition to a functional bike lane, we need to provide what we call the end of trip facilities. Bike parking is very important. We don't need a fancy one, but rather a strategic, like for example, near the main entrances. It has sufficient space and a safe bike rack for people to lock their bikes. So this is a bike parking in, I think in Think City, Penang. And this one is near the, I think, Gurney Plaza. And this one is in Amsterdam, I think. And of course, shower room. I think it's important to have a shower room and locker at the office if you intend to cycle to work. So in USM, we are very lucky because we have buildings that have shower rooms. So it's not really fancy. It's just like, you just put the shower head and, the toilet turns into shower room. So, I think it's very important. And the existence of shower room is very, very important. Next one is e-bike and cargo e-bike. And there's a considerable interest in the use of e-bikes in Malaysia. I think it's a convenient option for commuting in a tropical climate. And in some circumstances, it can be a good alternative for motorbikes as well. So there are many types of e-bike. Some do not require any pedaling. And the other one is pedal assisted, which will require paddling. So this will help reduce cycling efforts in hilly cities, and it also can provide mobility options to people that are not entirely comfortable using normal bicycle. I use an e-bike to commute to office, because in USM there are certain part that is quite hilly, and I think it's very useful to have this kind of bike. And I also I got a lot of questions about people asking, like, if you have kids, for example, how do you transport your kids? And if you do grocery, for example, where do you put grocery on two-wheel? So now we have what we call cargo e-bikes. So cargo e-bike is actually really amazing to transport staff and also people, like this one. But of course, you need a good cycling infrastructure to be able to cycle safely. The next one is Bike Plus Transit. Bike Plus Transit is great for first and last mile solution as well. So, as I mentioned earlier on, studies have shown that, most commuters won't bike to work if they have to travel more than 10 kilometers each way. But you don't have to bike your entire commute. It doesn't have to be door-to-door trip. So you can combine your bike trip with public transit, such as bus, train, and ferry. But of course, this will require an efficient public transport to support this idea. And then you see this one, fixing bike racks on public buses also can be useful. And this one is Rapid Penang. Rapid Penang, I think starting from last year, they allow folding bikes on some of its buses. But then again, to use Bike Plus Transit, like I said, we need to seriously improve our public transit. Okay, bike sharing. Similar to Bike Plus Transit, bike sharing also has a potential to solve the first and last mile issue. The bike sharing programs vary, but essentially the main principle is that users acquire the bikes with a short-term access, and then they can ride usually within short distances around the cities. And it also has a great potential if integrated with public transit. There are two common types of bike sharing, one with docking stations, and the other one is what we call dockless, or the free floating bikes. The one that you see in Penang is like this one, link bike. This one is actually with docking stations. And I think a lot of issues with bike sharing was that with the dockless or the free floating bicycle, like the one in KL and Singapore. All right, so moving on. To encourage utility cycling, we cannot solely rely on the hard measures, such as infrastructure and facilities, but equal attention must be paid to the software, the so-called software, which is campaigns, educations, and grassroots movement or advocacy. This is crucial in a low cycling context like us. I think we are not lacking in terms of promoting cycling for leisure or recreation and sport, but we certainly need concerted efforts to promote utility cycling. Penang State Government had taken the initiative to encourage and create awareness of bike commuting. I think they have this group called Bike on Fridays. While it's a commendable effort, but I'm not entirely sure if the group managed to attract people who intend to bike commuting to work. So, and in comparison with other Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia and the Philippines, I think we are still behind in terms of grassroots movement and advocacy in promoting utility cycling. And in my experience as well, when we launched a bike commute at USM 2 years ago, the main goal is to educate and change people's perceptions of the bicycle. As I mentioned earlier on, people tend to view or they tend to understand cycling just for the purpose of recreation or sports. And so we want to change these perceptions and narrative of a bicycle. So we want to encourage those who live on campus to use bicycle as a means or as an alternative mode of transport. But I'll have to say that we still have a long way to go. But I hope we are still on the right track. And then incentive. So one of the best ways to get people to change their behavior is to impact their wallet. Companies and government in many cities around the world are actually paying their employees for cycling to work. So they give discount, like for example, for bike equipment, they have tax rebates, and also they give out non-monetary incentive, like giving extra days of vacations. And so there are many schemes and programs that we can look at. So this is, I think, I always ask these questions about of incentive to my students, like how many of you are willing to cycle to class if, say, USM is willing to pay. So I would say that most of them, are interested to cycle to class. So I think incentive is a good way. But of course, there are problem with giving out incentive as well. So, okay, now before political, I think I switch out this, this one, car-free revolutions. As I described in the beginning, car culture has been so normalized in our everyday life, and to dismantle this culture is not easy, and it's such an uphill battle. But we desperately need to deprioritize automobile policy. We need to make driving harder and make other forms of green commuting easier. What we can do, we should, like for example, repeal policies that subsidize motor vehicle use, such as minimum parking requirements, free on-street parking, and fuel subsidies. And perhaps we can also impose what we call congestion charges and restrict or ban motor vehicles into the inner cities. And then we can also oppose any policy or plan to build more roads and highways. And then do not support policy on new national cars. So essentially, we need a transportation policy and urban development plans that strongly support bicycle use and sustainable transportation. Right. I think the biggest obstacle to investing and building cycling infrastructure and discouraging automobile policy is the political will that is necessary to pursue it. Utility cycling can be promoted successfully if it is prioritized politically. And like many other policy issues, it really requires long-term political commitment and priority. And so, we really need those in power to have the right mind and attitude and willing to push through the active and green policy agenda. And for a low cycling context like us, I think the politics of cycling has yet to shape or have an impact to the development and outcomes of cycling policy. And at the moment, I'm not aware of any concrete cycling policy. Oftentimes, it's just like a small part of the overall transport policy. But if you're serious about the climate crisis, we need to consider utility cycling, as part of the mainstream public policy. And of course, this will take political foresight and bravery, which is not easy. Finally, personal lifestyle. Many of the approaches that I talk about are at the institutional level. Equally important, I think we should also be thinking on personal level of the things that we can do to tackle climate change. And so I hope people will have the intentions of taking up bicycle for commuting. I think having the intention is a good start. So you just need to find reasons or motivations, and just do it, right? And finally, so I have a list of tips on how to start. If you intend to bike commuting, bike to work. Like for example, do I have time? Maybe I'll just quickly read through this. Start small with doable distance and frequency. Set a goal. Like for example, you don't have to cycle every day. Maybe set a goal like 1 or 2 times a week. Perhaps consider an e-bike or bike plus transit. And then keep track of your mile or days on an app, because if you keep track of how many times you ride and how many miles you ride, I think it's sort of like a motivation for you to keep going. And then your route, and if possible, find route with minimal traffic. Start early in the morning, just to avoid before it's getting too hot. And if you plan to shower at the office, bring change. And then, of course, safety first. Check your bike, lights, helmet. If you need high-vis attire, and then do not ride indoor zone. Follow traffic rules, traffic lights, hand signal, and then ride in a pace that is comfortable, because it's not a race, right? And finally, just stay alert and enjoy the ride. So that's all. Thank you for your attention. So you can follow us on our social media. We have on Facebook, BikeCommute USM Penang, and we also are on Instagram, BikeCommute USM. And if you have any questions, or if you want to chat about bike commuting, feel free to email me at nadhrah@usm.my. So thank you for your attention.
Okay, how is that?
Yeah, good. Yeah, can see. Good. Good to go.
Okay, so welcome everyone to our Zoom meeting, and thanks to Jedi for the kind invitation, and also thanks to Dr. Nadhrah for a very detailed presentation. Tonight, I will just be sharing my personal experience of what I've done on cycling, perhaps over more of what I've done this year. So as a background, I was living in Penang for the last 10 years until January last year, 2019. Then I moved to Kuala Lumpur. And before that, when I was in Penang, I was mainly active in this small WhatsApp group called Friends of Rapid Penang. So when I came to KL, I tried to use the buses, but I found that it's quite a challenge to use the buses where I stay because of the frequency. So I'm having a bit of problem trying to move my screen.
It's okay, Mr. Simon.
Okay. Okay, so this is my first slide. This is taken in Kuala Lumpur. As some of you may know, DBKL has spent quite a bit of money to paint the road. They're not really cycle lanes, but I just call that cycle paint, where we're supposed to cycle, but unfortunately, a lot of cars and vans will actually block this lane. So when I cycle past here, I usually go onto the service road, which is not blocked. But when I was taking the bus, I noticed that the bus stop here is always blocked. So as a bus rider, it's quite dangerous. I have to, the bus will stop, then you have to sort of cross the, maybe avoid motorbikes and some cars. Okay, then I attended a workshop by Greenpeace and Kami, and we were asked to set an environmental dream. So at that point in time, I said to myself, it will be nice if I can cycle from where I stay. I stay in near Taman Desa. So I set a goal of trying to, in the middle of last year, to cycle to KLCC, where I work, but I'm not doing office work. I'm doing a homestay business. So timing and things are a little bit more flexible for me. So for the first 10 months I was in KL, that was my dream, was to cycle to KLCC, because it was quite tiring waiting for buses. The buses here don't run on schedule. There's no real-time arrival. So what I did was, there was one day towards the end of last year, I went on Google Map. Unfortunately, Google Map, the cycling mode does not work. So I started at first using a walking mode. But when I start to set the walking mode, it sends me all over around Mid-Valley and into Bangsa and so on. So I had to sort of set these known destinations. So this is roughly, and then later on I try, and then I noticed that there was actually a cycle path. It starts here at this KTM station Mid-Valley, crosses over the bridge, and then it follows the river all the way until Brickfield, where it goes in. And then after that, after the ice kacang stall, it goes back to the river and then carry on all the way up here until you reach Central Market. But at Central Market, I have to go another 4 kilometers to KLCC. So as Dr. Nadhrah has mentioned, these are the things that I personally find challenging. Keeping cool, how to secure your bicycles. And I always try to be safe by following this principle of be safe, be seen. And also sometimes I do have to cycle at night back, and some roads are not well lighted. So I have to really depend on the bicycle light that I have. So I'll show you, okay, what really I was very pleasantly surprised that DBKL actually spent a lot of money on this project called the River of Life, where they have built a dedicated bicycle lane path all the way from Mid-Valley to Central Market. So this picture is taken at Mid-Valley, crossing the bridge, and it follows this path all the way. And this is Menara 118, which is quite near the Central Market. So this path goes all the way to Central Market with no cars, except at Brickfield, where we have to pass by a few places with cars. But over there is quite good because they have a quite wide pedestrian path, which I sometimes use it, and sometimes I go on the back lanes because on the back lanes it's actually more shady. So this whole path runs along the Klang River from Mid-Valley to Central Market. At this point in time, it's about 80% complete. I hope when it's completed, the lights are fully on, and you can see from the next picture. This is the picture on the right is the old, this path I believe has already been existing. A lot of big trees to provide shade, and it's very comfortable to cycle here. On the right is the Klang River. This part nearer the Central Market, it's where the monorail line goes over. And on the right again is the is the Klang River, and that's my bicycle. They're just about, this picture was taken about 2 months ago, and now they already complete all the pavement here. And I took this picture was taken by a man from the Indian temple. As I cycle past this Hindu temple often, as Dr. Nadhrah said, when you cycle, you get a chance to look and smile and hi to the various people that I meet. So he was kindly to take this photo. Nowadays, I cycle anytime when I need to go down to my homestay. So sometimes I don't care what time it is. Even if it's 2 p.m. when it's very hot, I will still go out, and that's how I keep myself cool. Get this hand socks. It's very effective to block the sun and to protect my neck. I have a handkerchief, something like what the scouts use, wear these socks to block the sun. If you have long cycling gears, long pants and long sleeve, then that would be really good. But I find that a bit too hot, and I just make do with what I have at the moment. Usually I do carry a few pieces of bed sheets and towels, so I just improvise by hanging them, hanging two on the handlebar. Not the best thing to do, but I just may do as my bicycle can't be fitted with pannier bags. Okay, now moving back to Penang. Coming back to Penang, this is as a member of PETUA, one of our active member there, Zulfikla. He's a counselor is our new counselor at BPP. So we were talking about cycling. So this is one cycle path that I've identified. It goes from Sunshine Falim. This is Sunshine Falim. Sorry, this is All Seasons Place here. Sunshine Falim is somewhere up here. It starts from Jalan Ru, and if you go along, it goes along Sungai Dondang, passing by the back of the police station, and then carries on through the back of the Batu Lancang Cemetery, along the river, and over here, that's where Sungai Dondang meets with Sungai AIR Itam, and then it carries on and meet Lorong Batu Lancang. This path, this cycle path, is actually a very old route that in the olden days, before Falim was developed, this whole place was all full of plantation. And if I were to cycle during my school days back in the 70s from Green Lane, I would cut through Cheeseman Road and use the lane, Lorong Batu Lancang. And then from there, we can actually cycle along the river all the way to Kampung Pisang. So it's actually an old path, but due to new development, some of these places have become less accessible. But it will not take a lot of money or resources to get this back into working condition and plant some trees to make it more shady. Just show you some pictures. Okay, this is what that really turned me off in Penang. is that this is labor area Tiantek, and there's supposed to be a cycling path, but this labor area Tiantek is more like a 4-lane highway, so it's not really safe to cycle here. So when I come back to Penang, I do cycle from Falim to Green Lane, so I have to use this way, and I normally go on the footpath to get away from the cars. Okay, on the right, these two photos are what we have now of the proposed bicycle lane from Falim to Lorong Batu Lancang. This is at the back of near the police station, behind the Bandar Baru police station. This picture is the one near the cemetery, and on the left is Sungai Dongdang. Okay, more pictures here. This is where Sungai AIR Itam flows from top here to the right, and this is where Sungai Dongdang meets Sungai AIR Itam. As you can see, I've taken this picture from the Shineville development, and this is the river reserve, which they have concrete over. In a way, it's nice that it's all concreted, but the trees have gone missing. This is also another, this is Shineville, and this is the houses there, and there's already river reserve that's concrete over, which can be easily. One of the challenge is KL, DBKL at certain places do provide this bicycle stands. This is right in front of another DBKL. So as for me, I cycle because I like to protect the environment, and it's good for health. And also, for me, it kills two birds with one stone. While I'm commuting, I can exercise. So I don't do much recreational cycling in KL now, but I do commuting, or as Dr. Nadhrah said, utility cycling. So if you have any question, please feel free to ask and I can share more. Okay, thanks.